a quick update on some of my winter sowing. Here is the Snow White Gomphrena, and that's looking pretty nice, so I'm going to get that planted out soon. The Raspberry Daiquiri Agastache, I have what looks to be about 2 plants in here, but so far they look pretty happy, so I'll take it. This is the Fairy Snow Balloon Flower. These are perennial, and there's probably 5 to 7 in there. The last time I counted, I think it was around 7. So I'm going to pot these up and let them grow on a bit more. As they are perennial, I want to use my front of the walkway border for some annuals this year. So I'm going to grow these in some pots for a bit longer, and in the fall I will then go ahead and plant them out. And my pink muhly grass, it needs to be divided and also potted up to grow on a bit more. Out of the perennials that I started from seed, most of them did well. The balloon flower, the muhly grass, the agastache is supposed to be perennial for me, but it doesn't usually make it back in my zone 6B. And this is the turtle head, or the chalone. So there are, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4 in here. So I'm also going to pot these up and let them grow on a bit longer. Now, 2 that did terribly were the Shoeshine Bergenia. I didn't get any germination on this whatsoever. So this one was a flop. And the Goat's Beard, I've also only have 1 seedling in here, and that only just sprouted recently. So it could very well be a weed. So time will tell. But another perennial that did really well through winter sowing was the Lady's Mantle. In fact, a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week ago now, I actually divided it into these containers, and that's what I'm planning on doing for the others. And while they're still small, they look to be happy. So all in all, pretty good on the winter sowing. Some snapdragons. I'm always kind of late on the snapdragons, and I don't know necessarily that they're a great candidate for winter sowing in my zone because they like cool weather, and by the time I get them in the ground, it's usually warm in summer. But if I can keep them alive, sometimes I get some blooms in the fall once it starts to cool off. And this variety should be really pretty. It's Lucky Lips Snapdragons, which is like a bicolored. It's white and fuchsia. And the Golden Jubilee Hyssop also did really well with the winter sowing. A couple of weeks ago, I opened up the container and I plopped them into this pot with some soil to let them grow on a little bit more. Sometimes when you plant small seedlings, I'm always worried about slugs kind of eating through them and them not making it. So I figured if I let them grow on a bit more in here, they'll be a little bit hardier when I plant them out in the landscape. But they have a really beautiful golden color, and they almost smell like mint, the foliage, when you rub on it. So I'm going to go ahead and plant a couple of these. I don't have room for all of them, so I'll probably plant 2 or 3 out in the landscape and gift a couple of the others. The cannas that I started from bare root are also doing really well, and I threw some nasturtiums in with those as a trailer. And the black elephant ear is also growing. I don't think it's going to be as large as I anticipated because the foliage seems a bit small, but I do have some coleus in the bottom here and some alyssum that I started from seed. The coleus I bought as a start, but the alyssum I started from seed, so I'm going to see how this fills out. I like to insert liners in my containers because if you fill these containers up with dirt, they get really heavy, and I store these in my basement for the winter. I don't leave them out because I don't want them to crack with the weather in the winter. So I usually just stick liners in here, and as this stuff grows out, it kind of spills to the edge of the container, so you don't even really see that there's a liner in it.
So here we are in my vegetable garden, and my dahlias have really taken off. See them there in the back in that grid we created? And I've actually gotten behind a bit on the pinching, so I'm going to catch up on that today. But look at my lettuce. Lettuce is a cool season crop, meaning that it likes cool temperatures. And we've been having a bit of a cool spring and some rain, which is wonderful. And so the lettuce has really taken off. Now, lettuce is a cut and come again type leafy green, which means that you can leave the plant in place and just cut on the leaves, harvest what you need, and the plant will keep producing more leaves and more lettuce for you, which is wonderful. So I'm going to start using this week because pretty soon it's going to start warming up, and lettuce does not like hot temperatures, so it will start to bolt, meaning that it will start producing seed. And at that point, lettuce will be done and it's time to pull it up and plant something new. Here's an example at the height at which you want to start pinching your dahlias. Once they get to be about 6 to 8 inches in height, and before they've had a chance to get leggy, is when you want to go in and start pinching them. So this here is my ketchup and mustard dahlia. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right to the bottom of this stem here, and I'm going to cut it. And that is where I'm going to start getting more branching on this dahlia. I'm really pleased with the amount of growth that these dahlias have put on in the last month. These have only been in ground for about 5 weeks. When we planted them on Mother's Day weekend, I only inserted some bone meal in the hole to encourage some root development, and they're doing really well. Now, in the past, I have tried potting up my tubers ahead of time, but I found that it was really time consuming. I was also having the added expense of having to buy potting soil to put them in pots. And if, in my experience at least, if you plant them in the ground at the right time, they will start growing once the conditions are right. And right now it's just starting to warm up. We've had some rain, so they've been happy and they're putting on a good deal of growth. But I've been a bit behind on pinching these. The 6 to 8 inch height is at the perfect place where you want to start pinching your dahlias. And not only do you pinch them to get better branching and more blooms, you also will pinch them so that you have a sturdier plant that is less leggy. And if you have a sturdier, less leggy plant, you are going to have a plant that can stand up to some wind and some rain without flopping over, because their stems are weak. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go ahead and catch up on some pinching. And you can see here that I have some difference in height with my dahlias. These here are really tall and those in the center are a bit shorter. So they're sort of growing at a different rate. The lighting could have something to do with it as well. But I'm going to go ahead and take these taller ones down a good bit so that they're not shading anything else, to give them all an opportunity to kind of grow together pretty evenly. I'm also going to take out some of this lower foliage so that they have a little bit more circulation, because I did plant my dahlias fairly close. All finished. I've pinched back all the dahlias, thinned out some of the foliage. So now they are all cleaned up and ready to continue growing. It should give them all a more level playing field in terms of getting equal light and giving the smaller ones a chance to catch up. And while I'm leaving the vegetable garden, I'll just give you one more quick update. My onions that I started with winter sowing are doing really well. These are the onion of Parma, which is a long day onion. And I have some jalapeno peppers that are also starting to put on some growth. Those I did buy as a 4-pack at a local nursery, but they're looking nice. I actually pinched them a couple of days ago and they started to branch out, which is great, because that hopefully will mean more jalapenos. And I threw some sunflowers in here. You can see they're leaning one way because they're reaching for sun. But what I wanted to show you is that my sage is blooming. I actually started sage from seed using winter sowing about 2 years ago, and it's come back for me in my Zone 6B garden for a couple of years now, which is lovely. And sage, along with oregano, which I have planted there, and chives, are perennial herbs, which means you can plant them once and they come back for you year after year. Now, sage also has medicinal purposes. My mom will actually cut a bunch of these leaves and freeze them over the winter. If someone has a cough, she will make tea out of these, and it's supposed to help. I should probably make some tea, because I've been battling this summer cold for about a week now, which is why I sound nasally, so I'm sorry about that. But it's getting these beautiful purple blooms. They're a light lavender color that looks a lot like Napata, and the reason for that is because sage is part of the mint family, along with perennials like Napata and Salvia. This really pretty nasturtium that my friend Catherine shared with me is starting to bloom. Now, nasturtiums are an edible plant. They have a bit of a peppery taste, and some people use them on salads. And also, they're typically considered a host plant, meaning that if you plant these in your vegetable garden, aphids will be attracted to this plant and leave your other plants alone. But I really think that it has beautiful foliage. They almost look like lily pads to me, and a really sweet yellow bloom. I also started a bunch of Cosmos and Zinnias from seed. Now, I have this variety here, which is the Zinnia Double Raspberry. That is a dwarf variety zinnia that I'm going to plant along the front of one of my borders. So I'm going to go ahead and get that done today. I may even pinch these so that they can encourage a little bit more growth. We'll see once I get them planted. And then these are, I have a few different varieties. I started Zinurita, and I started Polar Bear White, as well as a green variety called Envy, and even Queen Lime Orange. So some of them look better than others. I did already start to pinch some of these, but they're getting a bit of earwig damage on the foliage and some of the lower leaves, which this is normal. The lower leaves will start to get tattered after a while, and I just clean them up. But some of them look better than others. Some are growing more than others. I feel like this Envy one is pretty overzealous because it is humongous. We'll have to see what the blooms look like. But you see that? That's a big hole on the leaves, some kind of insect damage. I see a lot of earwigs on this wall, so that's my best guess as to what's doing it. But I'm gonna go ahead and try to get at least these here planted. And my friend Catherine, who is also a gardener, that gave me the nasturtiums from the vegetable garden, also gave me these, and I grew them last year. They are the Blue Horizon Ageratum, and they're really beautiful. So she gave me about 7 starts that I'm going to plant right behind the Dwarf Zinnia raspberry, and I think it's going to look really pretty together. And right here in my upper bed, what I call my retaining wall bed, is where I'm planning on putting a drift of those Sahara raspberry zinnias and the ageratum. I just dug up my Poems of Ecstasy iris that I had back there because they had gotten really large. And after your iris bloom is the perfect time to divide them and get them cleaned up. So I actually dug up a huge clump. I cut them a bit shorter, and I'm going to go ahead and place them back in that hole. I was able to give some to my neighbor, and I have a bit more that I'm going to give to someone else. And this should do a lot better now that it's divided. It should bloom a bit better. And when you plant your rhizomes, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you place them in your hole with the top of the rhizome exposed. You don't want to bury it too deeply because the sun needs to hit this rhizome in order for your iris to bloom best. And this one had gotten so big and crowded that a lot of this area was shaded, and so it didn't bloom as much as I had hoped it would. So I'm going to go ahead and place this back in the hole and cover it up, just so that the soil grazes the top of the rhizome. So here are the divided rhizomes, all nice and tucked in. So first what I do is I make this, a planting hole. Then I mound up the soil so I can spread the roots of the rhizome on that mound. And then I start packing some dirt in around each of these rhizomes. And what I do is I make sure that it's nice and tucked in and planted, but that some of the rhizome is exposed. So these are all set now, and I actually ended up putting them in a different spot so that they'll have more space. Initially, the iris was in that area there, but it was pretty crowded between 2 of those Bobo hydrangeas. So I decided to place it back here behind my Monet Purple Effect Weigela because it was a pretty open space here, and I thought that they would have more room to grow. And so I think this was a good spot to place them. And I'm all done planting up a drift of the double raspberry Sahara zinnias and the Blue Horizon ageratum. I put the ageratum in the back and the zinnias in the front. I did go ahead and pinch them when I planted them. And once these all fill in, I think it'll look really beautiful in the front of this bed. And it will help fill out the gaps from where I had removed a couple of dead roses. You're really good at spreading mulch.
Thanks. I learned from you. You know what I could use? I need those gloves with the claws, like the cat claws.
Oh, yeah.
That would be perfect for this.
Well, Father's Day's already passed, so did our anniversary, but maybe you'll get some in your stocking for next year.
I don't use gloves, so it's an improvement, right?
That is, very true. We picked up a few more bags of mulch to kind of get this area wrapped up for the season. That's what we're doing this evening. We got this Pinus Mugo Winter Gold planted in this spot here. I think it's going to work out well because this is a smaller spot and it's a topiary type conifer, so we can trim it to keep it tidy and compact. And I thought that this was a good spot to also plant the Dark Side of the Moon Astilbe. Because we have a gold colored Japanese maple here, this one's called Orange Dream. And then we have that conifer on the other side. And then the Shiraz Japanese maple that has a bit of a red coloring. I thought the colors played nicely off of each other. I also have a Japanese forest grass that I'm going to add in this general area, and my goat's beard. So I'm working on planting up this corner here. Perfect. And just 2 days after I filmed my garden tour, these beautiful iris started blooming. These are a Japanese iris insata called tiramisu. The Gomphrena starts have also been planted along my front walkway, and they don't look like much now, but hopefully they produce just as beautiful a show as they did last year. So as always, thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button, and please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos, and we'll see you soon.